Question 1 is to write the number 7025 in figures. If you're slightly unsure on this, make sure you put the headings, units, tens, hundreds and thousands first before you write the number. The 7 goes under the thousands, you've got no hundreds, and you've got 25, so 2 tens and 5 units. So it should be 7025. To write the following number in words, count 3 from the right, 1, 2, 3, and put a comma. Your commas will come after thousands, and if you kept going, after millions. So this is 9,000. And then you can look at the end of the number, which is 450, which gives us the rest of the number. $9,450. The next question is asking us to round a number to the nearest whole number. The number is 28.75. If you imagine this as money, you need to think, is 28.75 closer to £28 or to 29? And you should be able to work out it's closer to 29. And finally, on question 1, it's asking you to round a number to the nearest thousand. The number is 7,380, and again you need to make a decision, which does that lie closest to? Is it 7,000 or 8,000? And because it's less than 500, it's closest to 7,000. The next question is about this pattern generated from triangles. Part A asks you to complete the table. If you look at the table, the number of triangles in each pattern is going up in twos. 2, 4, 6. So to complete it, I'm going to just fill in 8 and 10. The number of triangles needed for pattern number 12, you need to find the connection between the pattern number and the number of triangles. And hopefully you'll notice that they are doubling each time. So in pattern number 12, I need to double 12, or times it by 2. And that gives me the answer 24. For the final part of the question, it says that Luke says that pattern number 40 has 82 triangles. And it tells you that Luke is wrong. If the exam paper tells you he's wrong, he's wrong. So don't ever say, no, he's right. So we've got to explain why. Well, we've just talked about the fact that the pattern doubles each time. So pattern number 40, we would expect to have twice as many triangles, which would be 80. You could write this calculation to show that you know why it's wrong, or you could actually write pattern number 40 would have 80 triangles. Or you could write it doubles each time. Question 3 is a question about reading scales. It's asking you to write down the temperature in an oven. We can see that our temperature lies between 200 and 250. And if you count the larger lines in here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. And with 50 between 250, each one is worth 10. That means that this is 200, 210, 220, 230, 240 degrees. For part B of the question, you are asked to mark on this diagram a temperature of 125. So first of all, look for 2 numbers on the dial that lies between. Those numbers are 100 and 150. And of course 125 is halfway between those numbers, so you need to draw an arrow that points halfway between. The last part of the question is on time. It tells you that Lorna switches on her oven at 5:50 p.m. and sets the temperature for 180 degrees. It takes 15 minutes for the oven to reach that temperature, and so you're asked what time the oven will reach the temperature. You need to add 15 minutes on to 5:50. So 10 minutes will take you to 6 p.m. plus another 5 will take you to 6:05 p.m. Question 4 is about extracting information from a table. The first part of the question tells you that Nick spends less than 10 minutes using his mobile phone on one of the 4 days. Which day? So you need to go to the column for Nick and look down the numbers here, the number of minutes he's used his phone each day. There's only one with less than 10, and that day is Thursday. For part B of the question, it says that on Sunday, Nick spent more time using his mobile phone than Dave. How much more time? So we need to look at the row for Sunday. Nick's used his phone for 35 minutes, and Dave used his phone for 28. So if I subtract Dave's time from Nick's, I'm going to find out how much more time Nick spent using his phone. 35 minus 28 is 7. So Nick used his phone for 7 more minutes. The final part of the question asks you to work out who spent the greater amount of time using their phone. And remember, it says you must show where you're working. You can't just write down a name. So to do this, we're going to take the minutes out of the table for each of the people. So for Dave, we're going to add up 7, 6, 17 and 28. And for Nick, we'll add up 6, 11, 12 and 13. And of course, you've got a calculator in this exam, so you can use it to help you do those calculations. So, using the calculator, I've added these up, and I can see that Dave used his phone for 58 minutes and Nick used his phone for 64. So the person who spent the longest on his mobile phone was Nick. So I'm just going to make that answer really clear by writing down Nick used his phone the most. Question 5 gives us a shape that's been divided into lots of little squares and tells us to shade 3/4. Whenever you see that, that fraction tells you to shade 3 in every 4 squares. So 3 in 4. If you look, this shape has been divided into rows of 4. So for each row of 4, I'm going to shade 3 of the squares. So on the first row it would look like that. Second row would look like that. And the third row it would look like that. And then if you look at the whole shape, you can see that I've shaded 3/4. It doesn't matter if you shade all the squares together or if they're randomly about, as long as you only shaded 9 squares, but it's easier to do it methodically like that. The next question says 72 people get on a bus, 15 people get off, and then 9 people get on, and asks you how many people are now on the bus. You need to think about what calculation you would need to do here. So we have 72 people on the bus. If 15 people get off, there's going to be less people on there, so it will be a subtraction. And if 9 more people get on, it would be an addition. Don't forget, this is a calculator paper. So at that point, you can use your calculator to do 72 minus 15 plus 9, which will give you the correct answer of 66. Mrs. Clark is sharing out £20 between Sally, Beth and Robert and John, and she gives £6.65 to Sally and shares the rest of the money equally between the other 3 people. The question asks you how much money Bethan gets. So the first thing we need to do is take away from the £20 the amount she's given to Sally. So 20 minus £6.65 I can do on the calculator. Leaves me with £13.35. Now she is sharing that between 3 people and she's sharing it equally, which means that I can divide that £13.35 by 3. That gives me the answer of £4.45. So the money that Bethan gets is £4.45. Next question is asking us to complete a tally table and complete the frequency column as well. It's a good idea to cross them out once you've placed them and to take your time doing this, because any mistake in this table loses you marks. Another good thing to do at this point is to work out how many tallies you should have in there in total. So I've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So I should make sure that in total these add up to 21. So I've got 5, 10, 14, 17, 20, 21. So I've got them all in there and I don't have too many. Then I fill in the frequency column with 3, 6, 9 and 3, and that completes the table. The last part of the question asks you to extract some information from the table you've just completed. It says work out the number of these students that get less than 20 marks. So if you look at the table, it's this first row where the students get less than 20 marks. So I just need to look at the frequency and the answer is 3. Question 9 asks me to draw a circle of radius 5 centimetres. So I'm going to need a compass. Remember, when you put your pencil into the compass, you must make sure that the point of the pencil is in line with the point of the compass and not too far past it or too close to it. And make sure that you've twisted that so it's in tight. This is asking me to draw a circle with a radius of 5 centimetres. Remember that the radius goes from the centre to the outside of the circle, so it's just that part. And to do that, I need a ruler and then to open my compass to 5 centimetres. This can be tricky, so if you do struggle with it, it's something you'll need to practice at home. I'm then going to put my compass on the cross and gently sweep to draw the circle. Remember, you should never touch the pencil, and do it using pencil so that if you do make a mistake you have a chance to erase it and do it again. Question 10 is all about numbers. It starts off asking for two different numbers that add up to an even number. Remember, even numbers end in either 2, 4, 6, 8 or 0. There were a huge number of choices. The easiest was probably 5 and 15, because 5 plus 15 equals 20. But you could have had 5 and 125, 15 and 125, 30 and 50, 30 and 60, 30 and 90, 30 and 100, 50 and 60, 50 and 90, 50 and 100, 60 and 90, 60 and 100, or 90 and 100. So lots of choices there. The next question asks you for a multiple of 20. It's important you know what multiple means. So a multiple is any number that would be in the 20 times table. You have a choice of these. So 60 would be in the 20 times table, 3 times 20, or 100 would. Part 3 is asking you for a factor of 45. So a factor is a number that divides into 45. Multiples are either going to be the same size or bigger, and factors are going to be the same size or smaller. So we want a number that divides into 45. The most obvious is 5, because any number that ends in 5 divides by 5. But you could also have 15. And finally, we're looking for a cube number. Now, a cube number is the result of timesing a number by itself 3 times. And you can find out if a number is a cube number by actually putting the number into your calculator and finding the cube root. The cube root is found on these calculators by using your funky button and pressing the X cubed button. So you could then try the different numbers that were in the list. If you don't get a whole number answer, it's not a cube number. So you could have tried the whole list, but the correct answer, and I'll show you using this, was 125, which is the cube of 5. This question is based on buying ink cartridges, and it tells us right at the beginning that George wants to buy exactly 10. So any calculations you do need to be for 10 cartridges. There's 2 different ways to purchase them: singly, where you can buy 1 cartridge for £9.39, or in packs of 3. So first off, I'm going to find out how much it would cost to buy 10 £9.39 cartridges. So don't forget, you've got your calculator to support you, so you can do 10 times 9.39 on your calculator, and it will tell you it's 93.9 or £93.90. Remember, you are working in money here. To use the packs of 3 cartridges, 3 packs would get me 9, so I'm going to need to add an extra one on top as well. So I'm going to work out the cost of 3 lots of £24.30 and 1 lot of £9.39, and then add the 2 together. Obviously 1 lot of £9.39 is £9.39, but I'm going to use the calculator to do 3 times £24.30, and that gives me an answer of £72.90. And to that I'm going to add the £9.39 single cartridge, so that I've got 10, making it £82.29. Now, just for adding up the cost of 10 of those calculators, you start earning marks. I've now worked out a cheaper way to find it, and it is the cheapest because I'm using the maximum number of packs from the bulk buy cartridges. So now I just need to do a subtraction to find the difference in cost. So the difference in cost is going to be £93.90 minus £82.29. So I'm just going to calculate the answer to 93.9 minus 82.29, which gives me the answer of £11.61. Now when I write the answer onto this line, note that there's no pound sign or anything there, which means that you will drop a mark if you don't add it in. So the answer is £11.61. In question 12, you're asked about these shapes. Part 1 asks you to write down the letters of a pair of shapes that are congruent. The word congruent means that they are the same. And they may have been rotated, but they're identical shapes. And the 2 shapes that are the same are this one and this one. You can see it's just been rotated a bit. So your answer should have been B and D, these 2. The second part of the question asks you to write down a pair of shapes that are similar. Similar means that they look the same, but they're a different size. And when I talk about them looking the same, one of them wouldn't suddenly be wider or have longer legs or something. So we're looking for things that look alike, and again they may be rotated. The 2 shapes are actually these. If you compare any of the other shapes, they don't get proportionally larger, they kind of lose shape. So this one, for example, has got wider, this one's got taller, and so on. So it's these 2 shapes, G and E. And if you look, shape G onto shape E, each one of the squares on shape D has been replaced by a 4 square on shape E, which means that it's definitely similar. And the last part of the question, so you've got that, is to find the perimeter of shape D. And to do that, we're just going to count squares around the edge of the shape. And I'm going to start where I've already put a tick. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So the perimeter of that shape is 16 centimetres. This question is dealing with negative numbers. It starts off by asking you to write down the time with the lowest temperature. So you just need to look for the smallest number here. The smallest number is going to be your largest negative number. So that's -4, and the time at which it was -4 was 6 AM. It's essential to write down AM or PM here because you actually have a choice. Part B asks you to work out the difference between the temperature at 2 and the temperature at 6. The temperature at 2 PM is 8 degrees and the temperature at 6 is 5. And to work out a difference we do a subtraction. 8 minus 5 is 3 degrees. And then finally it tells you that between 10 PM and midnight the temperature goes down 5 degrees. Now be careful with this because we don't have any information beyond 10 PM. So this is asking you to work it out yourself. At 10 PM the temperature is -1 degrees. And we're told that it's going to go down a further 5 degrees, which means we would be doing a calculation of -1 minus 5. If you're not happy doing that in your head or on a number line, you've got the calculator in this exam, but remember that the way to enter a minus number is using this button down here. So -1, and from that I am subtracting 5, and that gives me the answer of -6 degrees. Bear in mind common sense that your answer must get lower and colder if the temperature's gone down. So the answer there is -6 degrees centigrade. I can't quite get it in the camera. There you go. Okay, the next question is about a yoghurt factory, and it tells you what goes into a tank of yoghurt, the ingredients with their weights, and then tells you how many pots can be filled from each kilogram of yoghurt in that tank. And you're asked simply enough, is there enough yoghurt in that tank to fill 750 pots? So the first thing you need to do is work out what's in the tank by adding up this list of numbers. You can of course use your calculator to do it, but it adds up to 96 kilograms. That's how much is in the tank. Now you're told that for every one of those kilograms you can fill 8 pots. So if you want to know how many pots 96 kilograms can fill, you need to times 96 by 8. The answer to that is 768. So that tank of yoghurt can fill 768 pots. So if you want to answer the question, is there enough yoghurt to fill 750 pots? Well, there is. There's actually enough to fill 768. But you do need to say that. Yes, you could fill 750 pots. Question 15 is a two-way table, and two-way tables work so that across the rows everything in that row would add to meet the total there, and down the columns everything in that column would add to make the total there, and if you added all of these or this row across you would get the total here. So the easy ones to start off with are the addition ones, the one where the only box you need to fill in is the total and these are full. So that's what I'm going to do first. So to find out the total I need to add those three numbers, 85 plus 29 plus 54, and the answer is 168. There aren't any other rows where I only need to work out the total at this stage, but there is a column, so I'm going to do this one next. 29 plus 31 plus 5 gives me 65. in terms of what I do next, I can only do ones where there's one gap along either a row or a column. So for example, I couldn't do this one yet because there's 2 gaps. But I could do this one here. Now what we know is that these 3 boxes have to add up to make that one. So I need to work out what's missing. So the first thing I'm going to do is add these 2. And they add to 339. Now I know that this has to total 366. So I'm going to do a quick calculation, which will be 366 minus the 339 that those 2 add to. So 366 even, 366 minus 339. And the answer is 27. Now I can do the same with others where I know 2 of the pieces of information. So for example here I've got 85 and 13. If I add those I get 98. So the calculation would be 191 minus 98 to give me what's missing there, which is 93. So I'm now left with 2 gaps here. The same thing though, I know that if I add these 2 and the missing one, I should get 27. So 13 plus 5 is 18. So to calculate that one, I'm going to do 27 minus 18, which is 9. And then to fill in the final box, I can just add up these 3 numbers. 54, 47 and 9, which gives me 110. If you want to be really sure that you've got this completely correct, you could then add up every single row to make sure that all of your rows total the numbers down the side and all of your columns total the numbers at the bottom. Question 16 is about faces, edges and vertices. Faces are the flat parts of the shape, the edges are the edges, so these lines here, and the vertices are the corner. If you think about the fact that the word vertices has a V, which makes a corner, that should help you remember. So, to start off with the faces, I've got 1 here, 2, 1 at the back, 3, 1 on the side, 4, and don't forget underneath, 5. The edges are probably easiest counted by putting a little dash on each one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then at the base 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 edges. And finally, we're going to look at the vertices. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 on top, 5. The second part of the question asks you to draw a sketch of the net for that pyramid. So that's the flat shape that you could fold up to make a pyramid. Note that if it says sketch, it doesn't need to be measured or accurately constructed using a protractor or a compass, but you should use a ruler so that it looks vaguely like what it should. So the base is a square, so I'm going to start off with a vague square like so. And each side of the pyramid is a triangle, so on each of those squares, I'll try that again. On each of those squares I'm going to draw a triangle. Remember, it doesn't have to be wonderfully accurate, but it does need to include the base and 4 triangles which make up those faces, and it also needs to be joined up in such a way that you could cut it out and fold it so it would connect. There you go. Question 17 is really asking you, can you use your calculator? And it's asking us to work out 3.2 squared plus the square root of 7.5. Your squaring and square root buttons on your scientific calculators are here. But if you don't have a scientific calculator, although it will have a square root button, it won't have a squaring button, and it actually makes these questions more difficult for you. So I can type this straight into the calculator, 3.2 squared plus the square root of 7.5. and I press equals. It tells you to write down all the figures from your calculator display, and you need to write them all down. So that is 12.97861279. Don't cut them off, write everything down that's there. The second part of that question asks you to write your answer correct to two significant figures. Your first significant figure is your first non-zero digit. So there's my first two significant figures, and I look at the 9 to decide, is that number closer to 12 or 13? Well, 12.9 is closer to 13, and therefore, rounded to two significant figures, that number is 13. The final part of the question is to work out the value of 10 to the power of 5. Again, you need your calculator for this. If you have a non-scientific calculator, you could calculate this by doing 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So that 10 multiplies itself 5 times. If you have a scientific calculator, however, this button here will help you do that in one go. So I just type 10, press this button which raises the power, and press 5, and it gives me the answer straight away, which is 100,000. The next question is about using algebra for substitution, but you can use the calculator to help you do the calculation once you've worked out what it's asking you to do. So this tells us that f equals 8 and that the value that we want to calculate is 2f plus 7. So first of all, write down what this means. This means 2 times f plus 7. And then to substitute, you're going to replace that f with the value 8. So you would calculate 2 times 8 plus 7. You can do that on your calculator, and it gives you the answer 23. The second part of the question is slightly more complicated in that you've got two different values given and one of them is negative. But you still need to just work out what this is telling you to do. So this means 3 times g plus 5 times h. You're told that g is worth minus 2. So that means you've got to calculate 3 times minus 2 and then add 5 times h, where h is 4. 5 times 4. You can do this on your calculator. 3 times, and remember this is what makes it a minus, minus 2 plus 5 times 4. And that gives you the answer 14. Okay, here's a pie chart. The first part of the question asks us for the fraction of the time Jill spent cutting the grass. So Jill spent 40 degrees of that pie chart cutting the grass, and the fraction comes from writing that 40 out of the total number of degrees on the pie chart, and you all know that that's 360. So your fraction is 40 out of 360. The second part of the question tells you that Jill spends 7 hours weeding, and then asks you how much time she spent planting. So one of the things we need to do is work out how many degrees on the pie chart represent each hour. Now if we calculate the angles on this pie chart, you can see that we've currently got 100 plus 80 plus 40, and to calculate the angles that are here we need to subtract those angles, which total 220, from 360. So the first part of my calculation is finding out what that angle should be. So 360 minus 220 is going to equal 140. So I know that the angle in there is 140 degrees, and that represents 7 hours. Now to find out how many degrees there are per hour, I'm just going to divide the 140 by 7. That gives me the answer of 20 degrees. So 20 degrees equals 1 hour spent on doing something in her garden. So if I'm looking at how much time she spent planting, I know that there were 80 degrees devoted to planting, and for each 20 degrees of that was 1 hour. So if I calculate 80 degrees divided by 20, you'll find out that the answer is 4. She spent 4 hours planting in her garden. Question 20 is on scale drawings and on bearings, and it tells you first off that the scale of 4 centimetres represents 1 kilometres. This is going to be important. The first part of the question asks you to work out the real distance of Beckhampton from West Kennet. So we're going to measure it in centimetres and convert it to kilometres. Now yours would have been shrunk, so it'll be very slightly different. When I measure that, it measures 10.2 centimetres. So to find out what that is in kilometres, I need to divide it by 4. So 10.2 divided by 4 is 2.55 kilometres. The second part of the question uses bearings. It tells you that the village Avebury is on a bearing of 038 degrees from Beckhampton, and it tells you that it's 6 centimetres from B. We need to mark that town or village Avebury on that diagram. Now the thing to remember about bearings is they are always measured from the north line in a clockwise direction. So if this is from B, I need to go to B, find the north line and put my protractor on it, and if you just remember that for bearings you hold your protractor so it looks almost like a capital B, that will help you. I'm going to measure 38 degrees, so I'm starting at 0. It's going to be an acute angle, and I find between 30 and 40 and then work out where 38 is and mark it. I then need to measure 6 centimetres from B going out in that direction, and that will give me the position of Avebury. So if I put the ruler on here, line it up with that line, this is where Avebury is, and it asks you to mark it with a cross. Question 21 is a distance time graph, and it's all about Simon's cycle ride. It tells you that at 3 p.m. Simon stopped for a rest. How long did he rest? A rest is indicated on a graph like this with a horizontal line, so this is where he rests, and you can find out how long he rested by reading from the time part. So he stops at 3, and the rest stops halfway between 3 and 4, which means he rested for half an hour or 30 minutes. The next part of the question asks how far Simon was from home at 5 p.m. If you go to 5 p.m. and draw a line up until you hit the graph, and then draw another line across to the distance axis, you'll find that Simon was 20 kilometres from home at 5 p.m. The final part of this question tells you that at 5 Simon stops for 30 minutes. He then cycles home at a steady speed, and it takes him 1 hour and 30 minutes, and you're asked to complete the travel graph. The first part of the graph is going to be a 30-minute stop. A stop is horizontal and will go from 5 o'clock until 5:30. So here is my horizontal line. I then know that it takes him 1 hour and a half to get home. Home is at the base of this line, so if it's 5:30 now, he will get home at 7 p.m. So I'm going to put a little mark there on the graph and then draw a line from the end of his rest to 7 o'clock to show his journey home. Question 22 asks me to draw 2 graphs and then to find the gradient of a third. So the first graph is the line x equals 3. What I want is a line that crosses my x-axis at 3, and the line is just going to go here. An alternative way of doing this is to come up with 3 pairs of coordinates where the x coordinate is always 3. So something like this: 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 3. My x coordinate is always 3. If you plotted those points, you would see that they all lie on this line, and you could just join it up and fill the graph. The second graph you're asked to draw is the graph of the line y equals x. Now that means that your x coordinate and your y coordinate are going to be the same. They are equal. So you can either come up with 3 pairs of coordinates where the x and y coordinate are the same, so 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and pop them on and then plot it. Or you can memorise this graph. It's asked for a lot on GCSE papers, particularly when looking at subjects like reflection. So this is the graph that goes up 1 square at a time, diagonally across your axes, like so. The third part of this question asks you to find the gradient or steepness of the line drawn on the grid. Now the gradient is a measure of how many squares or units you go up for every 1 unit you go across on the graph. So you can do it as simply as this, in that here if I go across 1 square and it is 1 unit, and then work out how many squares I have to go up to hit the line. And in this case it's 1.5, so my gradient is 1.5. There is another way to do it using a calculation. So you choose a point where you get whole squares. So for example, I can draw a triangle like this, and you can see that there are 3 squares there and there's 2 squares across. If I divide the vertical distance by the horizontal distance, 3 divided by 2, I get the same answer, which is 1.5. Either way, the gradient is 1.5. Question 23 is about simplifying numbers with indices. You can either learn and remember the rules for these, but I'll show you where those rules come from. So if I was timesing n to the power of 5 by n to the power of 3, n to the power of 5 is actually n times itself 5 times. So n times n times n times n times n. And then I'm multiplying that by n to the power of 3, which is n times itself 3 times. If I now look at this, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 n's timesing themselves. So my answer is n to the power of 8. You can also remember this by remembering the rules. So the rules are that if you are multiplying the indices, you can just add the tops. So 5 plus 3 would also have given you the 8. When it comes to division, you can do the same thing. We've got n to the power of 7 divided by n to the power of 2. So I'm going to write out my 7 n's on the top of a fraction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to have n squared, or n times n, underneath. Now because we're dividing, I can cancel these down. So one n will cancel an n out there, and the other one will cancel that, leaving me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 n's, or n to the power of 5. Again, there is a rule for this, and when you divide indices, you can just subtract their numbers. So 7 minus 2 would also have given you the answer, n to the power of 5. Question 24 is about speed and distances, and you're told that Peter walks 15 miles in 6 hours. You probably already use the speed, distance and time triangle for science. The easy way to remember what goes in it is if you start at the bottom and put in sausages, and of course sausages don't talk, although there's a sausage with a mouth who may at least be able to hum a little bit. So if we're asked to find Peter's speed, I would cover up that part of the triangle and it would tell me to divide the distance by the time. The distance was 15 miles and the time was 6 hours. So I'm going to do 15 divided by 6. 15 divided by 6 is 2.5, which means that he was walking at 2.5 miles per hour. The second part of the question is to do a conversion between miles and kilometres, and you're given the conversion on here. So 5 miles equals 8 kilometres. Sunita says Peter walked more than 20 kilometres, and you're asked if she's right. So the only way you can find out if she's right is to actually convert the 15 miles he walked into kilometres. Well, if you think about it, if 5 miles is 8 kilometres, 15 miles is 3 times as long. So you could do 8 times 3 to calculate that answer, or you could add up 8 3 times to get there. 8 times 3 is 24, which means that Peter did walk more than 20 kilometres. He actually walked 24. Remember, the question was, is Sunita right? So you do need to say, yes, Sunita is right. And you could add on to it, he walked more than 20 kilometres. Question 25. Mr Watkins is going to buy oil for his central heating, and he can put 1,500 litres of oil in his oil tank, and he already has 850 in there. He's going to fill it. You're asked to calculate how much oil, or how much it's going to cost to pay for the oil, and you're given a price per litre and also a discount that he's going to get. But the first thing you need to do, and the first thing that will earn you marks, is work out how much he needs to buy. So if he's got 850 litres in the tank and it holds 1,500, you need to find out the difference. So 1,500 minus 850 is your first calculation. So he needs to buy 650 litres of oil. Now we know that he's going to pay 67.2 pence per litre. So let's find out what he'll pay before his discount. So I'm going to do 650 times 67.2 pence per litre. Now, if I want to, I could convert that now so that it was in a decimal form for entering in the calculator. Remember, if I leave it like that, it's going to give me my answer in pence. So if I do leave it like that, 650 times 67.2 gives me the answer of 43,680 pence. Remember, there are 100 pence in every pound, so if I want to convert this back into pounds and pence, I just need to divide it by 100. So my answer is £436.80. Now at this point, I haven't worked out his 5% discount, so that's what I'm going to do now. You have a calculator, and I would suggest using it for this question and using a calculator method to work it out. If I'm going to get 5% off of the price of oil, the first thing I need to do is calculate 5%, and 5% as a decimal, I divide it by 100, which gives me 0.05. Remember, you can do this on your calculator so that you get the correct answer. I'm then going to multiply the 0.05 by the £436.80, and that will tell me what 5% of that amount is. So 0.05 times 436.8. Oh. Okay, now that answer is £21.84. So that's my discount. So if the question is asking how much he's going to have to pay for the oil he needs to buy, I need to take that discount away from the £436.80. So 436.8 minus 21.84. And my answer is £414.96. You would earn marks throughout that question for doing different elements of it. So it's important to try and do as much as you possibly can. Question 26 is on probability, and it's all to do with this four-sided spinner. In this probability table, you have gaps for the numbers 2 and 4, and you're told that the probability of it landing on 2 or 4 is the same. So we need to work out the probability for those two. Now you should know that all probabilities add up to 1, and what we've got here adds up to 0.3. So to calculate how much is missing, I need to do 1 minus 0.3, which is 0.7. Now this probability is shared between these two, which means I need to halve it or divide it by 2. So the next part of the question is 0.7 divided by 2. And my answer is 0.35. And the probability the spinner will land on 4 is 0.35. This was a 3-mark question, so do use the marks to kind of get an idea of how much work you might need to do to be able to answer it. The second part of the question tells you that Shunya is going to spin the spinner 200 times, and it asks you to work out an estimate for the number of times the spinner will land on 3. This is a basic multiplication, so you are going to times the 200 here by the probability it will land on 3. And the probability it will land on 3 you take from the table, and it's 0.1. So that's the calculation you need to do. And the answer is 20. Okay, there's no real need for a calculator on any of these questions. They're algebra and they're based on expanding brackets and factorising them. I've taught you to use the grid method to expand. So I'm going to start off drawing my grid. The number on the outside goes down here, and the x and the 4 goes up here. 3 times x gives you 3x, 3 times 4 gives you 12, but remember when you write the answer on the line, you need to have a connector between the two that will either be plus or minus. If the number in here is positive, it will be a plus, like that, and if the answer in here is negative, it would be a minus. The next question is very similar, it's just got a few more letters. So again, I'm going to draw my grid, and here I'm going to put x, and then above x squared and 2. Now x times x squared is going to give us x cubed, and x times 2 gives me 2x. So the answer here is x cubed plus 2x. And the final part of the question is asking you to factorise x squared and minus 6x. Now in actual fact you can use the grid to help you do this as well, because what you have there are the answers. So in this box is x squared, and in this box is minus 6x. Now what's going to go on this side is something that is common to both of these, and I think it's fairly obvious that there is an x in here and an x in there. And then you need to work backwards. What would you times x by to get x squared? It would be another x. And what would you times x by to get minus 6x? It's minus 6. So once you've got them like that, you can rewrite them using the bracket x and x minus 6. The final question is finding the volume of the prism in this question. Right back at the front of the paper, you're actually given the formula to find the volume of a prism, and it is the area of the cross section times the length. So if I look back at this question, I need to find the area of this cross section and times the answer by 20. To help me do that, I'm going to draw this out so it's a flat shape and a bit more like what I'm used to looking at when calculating area. So it just needs a quick sketch, similar to what's there, and to transfer the values of the lengths that you've already been given. So that I know that that's 7, the top there is 5, the whole of the bottom is 11, and this part is 4. Now I'm going to split this shape up into 2, and that will be 2 rectangles, so I'm going to split it there. This rectangle I can already calculate the area on because I have both the length and the width. but this one I don't, because although I have its height or its width here, I don't know how long this is. However, I can find it because I know in total that's 11, and I know that this part of it, so up to here, is 5, which means that that part there must be 6, because 5 plus 6 is 11. I then calculate the areas of those two. You can use a calculator if you want, but this is 7 times 5, which is 35 centimetres squared, and this would be 6 times 4, which is 24 centimetres squared. Now you remember, I need the area of the whole cross section, which means I need to add these two together. So 35 plus 24 gives me 59. And if you remember, the way to find that volume is to multiply that by the length of the prism, which is 20. So my final calculation is 59 times 20, and I'm going to use the calculator for that. 59 times 20. My answer is 1180. And that's it.